I will never forget that night. The chandeliers above the ballroom threw down golden light, and my family's laughter rang louder than the music. My mother raised her glass and, with a smile sharp enough to cut, said, "Here's to useless relatives who waste millions on apartments but can't keep a family together." The words stung. Everyone laughed. Glasses clinked. My hand tightened around the leather folder resting on the table. Inside were the mortgage papers for my penthouse signed just a week earlier. A home worth nearly $2 million, yet, in that moment, I felt like I owned nothing at all. I sat very still, pretending to sip champagne. The bubbles burned, though I hardly tasted them. Around me, relatives beamed at one another, comfortable in their little jokes. I was the punchline, the silent shadow in a tailored suit. I had worked years in finance, saved carefully, and finally bought a place of my own. Still, none of that mattered. My success was theirs to mock my name, theirs to drag. A soft buzz rattled the table. My phone lit up with an email from my bank. Another transfer had gone through funds I had sent earlier in the week to my parents so they could keep their Florida lifestyle alive. For 6 years, I had covered their mortgage, their medical bills, even their vacations. Yet tonight, they laughed at me as if I were nothing but an empty shell. You might think I would stand and shout. I did not. I sat there, face calm, heart roaring. That's the thing about humiliation. It can hollow you out, leave you cold and oddly clear. My father whispered something to my cousin, and both of them glanced my way. They smirked as if I were an outsider, not blood. But what they didn't know was that my patience was wearing thin. Every sneer, every jab about money and failure, every careless toast was chiseling at the wall I had built to keep the peace. I felt the cracks widening. Soon I told myself the wall would fall. Across the ballroom, waiters wheeled in a towering cake. Cameras flashed. My younger cousin, glowing in an expensive gown, kissed her fiancé and waved to the crowd. I should have been proud, but all I felt was distance. They stood on a stage bathed in light, while I sat at a table near the edge. I might as well have been invisible. A thought struck me then: maybe invisibility was freedom. If they could not see me as family, why should I keep acting like one? The idea settled like a seed. I did not water it that night, but I kept it. Seeds grow even in silence. I'll explain in a moment how far things went, but first tell me where you're watching from and make sure you subscribe. We need to talk about families and money, about betrayal that comes dressed as love. Because that night in the ballroom was only the beginning. The next morning, I sat in my penthouse blinds, half closed against the Sunday. The folder from last night lay open on the counter, mortgage papers, spread like an accusation. I had signed away years of my life to own this place, yet the sound that echoed in my ears was my mother's toast, her voice dripping with scorn while the family roared with laughter. It was not the first time they had mocked me. For years I had been the one writing checks, sending wire transfers, covering bills that were not mine. Every month, like clockwork, a few thousand left my account and landed in my parents' hands. Retirement in Florida does not come cheap, especially when it includes season tickets, beachside brunches, and the occasional casino trip. They told friends they had earned this ease. I knew the truth. My paychecks kept their world afloat. I scrolled through my phone. Photos filled the family group chat, my uncle leaning back with a bottle of champagne, cousins flashing diamond rings, my parents grinning on some resort balcony. One post caught fire on social media. My uncle had shared a picture of their table at a Las Vegas nightclub covered in glasses of champagne. The caption read, "Winners back winners, freeloaders don't count." He had tagged nearly every family member, except me. The comments were brutal. Acquaintances cheered them on, not realizing the so-called freeloading relative was the very person financing their trips. I stared at the screen until my vision blurred. It was one thing to be mocked in private. It was another to see it broadcast to strangers, liked and shared, until humiliation spread like wildfire. I remembered the night of my surgery last year. The pain had come fast, sharp enough to buckle me to the floor. The emergency room lights, the gurney, the surgeon's grave tone, it all returned in flashes. What stayed with me most was not the fear of dying, but the silence of my phone. I had called my parents, begged them to watch my place to come to the hospital. They had been in Las Vegas then, too, and could not be bothered to leave the poker table. My father sighed, told me not to be dramatic. My mother laughed in the background about missing the show. I had survived the operation alone. A nurse called a friend to stay with me while my parents sent a text the next morning, asking if I could cover their mortgage payment on time. When I think of betrayal, I do not picture knives or shouting matches. I picture a phone that does not ring when you need it most. I picture laughter echoing in a ballroom while you sit invisible at the edge. That morning in my penthouse, I closed the folder and placed it in a drawer. I knew something had shifted. They thought I would keep paying, keep smiling, keep letting them turn me into the family's silent provider. But they were wrong. I will tell you later what I did next. For now, remember this betrayal often wears a smile, and sometimes it carries your last name. It was Thanksgiving when the mask slipped further. The dining room table stretched the length of the house, covered in dishes that smelled of butter and sage. Silverware gleamed, crystal glasses caught the candlelight. My cousin carved the turkey while relatives passed platters with easy laughter. On the surface, it was a picture of family warmth. But beneath it ran a current of something colder. Halfway through the meal, my younger cousin leaned back in her chair, wine in hand. She smiled sweetly, then said in a voice that carried across the table, "Half of your penthouse is basically ours, you know. It should be treated as family property. A $2 million apartment shouldn't belong to just one person." The words silenced even the clinking of forks. Then one by one, heads nodded. My father chuckled as though she had merely stated the obvious. My mother added, "It's true. We all should have access. Think of it as a shared estate. It's what families do." I sat still, my fork hovering above untouched stuffing. Inside, I felt something twist, anger, and disbelief, mingling until they were indistinguishable. I had signed the mortgage alone, paid every dollar from my own earnings. Yet here they were, dividing the walls and windows, as if I were just a caretaker. I forced a smile, the kind you wear when you know a storm is coming. Outwardly calm, inwardly unraveling. If they could claim my home so easily, what would they claim next? Later that evening, while coats were gathered and goodbyes exchanged, I slipped into the hallway. My phone buzzed. A notification popped up from a group chat I had never seen before, family retreat plans. Somehow my number had been added. My pulse quickened as I scrolled. The messages were plain. My parents and cousins discussed turning my penthouse into a holiday property. "We could host New Year's there," one wrote. "Plenty of space and Morgan won't mind. After all, it's family." My mother had added a laughing emoji, followed by, "We'll make copies of the keys. Easier that way." I stood in the dim light, the phone heavy in my hand. It was not just talk anymore, it was a plan typed out in careless certainty. They were plotting to occupy what I had sacrificed years to build. I slipped the phone back into my pocket before anyone noticed. My chest felt hollow, as if someone had scooped out whatever trust was left. At that moment, I understood I was not a relative in their eyes. I was a resource, a bank account, a roof they could claim. But what they didn't know was that I had already started thinking 2 steps ahead. They believed I would stay silent, that my loyalty would keep me bound. They were wrong. The call came on a gray morning my grandfather had passed. He was the last elder who still spoke to me with kindness, who asked about my work without turning it into a joke. Grief settled heavy in my chest, but alongside it came unease. I knew what funerals meant in my family. They were not only for mourning, they were for maneuvering. The service was held in a cathedral with high ceilings and the smell of lilies. After the prayers and the solemn hymns, we gathered at the law office downtown for the reading of the will. The room was paneled in dark wood shelves lined with books that looked older than all of us. My relatives filed in faces, carefully composed. I carried nothing but a folder tucked beneath my arm, thin but heavier than it looked. The lawyer cleared his throat and began reading. I listened quietly until my mother interrupted, her voice sharp with confidence. "Before we proceed, we should clarify something about Morgan's penthouse." My father chimed in, nodding as if rehearsed. "Half of that property belongs to us. Family first. We've spoken with the old family lawyer about making sure it's recognized." The words hit me harder than the organ music had at the funeral. They were using my grandfather's death as a stage to seize what I had built. Their faces gave nothing away, but I could see the satisfaction in the set of their shoulders. My cousin smirked, whispering to another as though this were already decided. I stayed quiet. Sometimes silence draws more attention than argument. The lawyer shifted uncomfortably, glanced at his papers, then back at me. He looked as though he wanted to speak, but thought better of it. I slipped my folder onto the polished table. Inside were years of bank statements, every transfer I had made to my parents, every bill I had covered. The numbers told a story. More than $1 million poured into their lives while they treated me as little more than an afterthought. But I did not open it, not yet. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A message from an unknown number flashed across the screen. Check the second page of the will. They forged it. My heart thudded, but my face did not change. I scrolled discreetly, and there it was, a section written in a style that did not match the rest, an addition naming my parents as partial heirs to any family estate. It was clumsy, desperate, but dangerous, all the same. I looked up at them, my parents, my cousins, all so certain. They thought I would fold, that I would let them carve my life apart in the name of family unity. What they didn't know was that the folder on the table was not just paperwork, it was a weapon. And soon, very soon, I would use it. The air in that wood-paneled office grew heavy like a storm pressing against the windows. My parents sat taller, convinced they had secured their claim. Cousins whispered behind manicured hands, already picturing parties in my penthouse as though it were theirs. I waited until the lawyer finished stumbling through the altered will. Then I placed my folder in the center of the table. Before anyone starts dividing up what isn't theirs, I said, my voice even, let's review the truth. I flipped open the folder. Inside were years of bank statements organized neatly, line after line of transfers, mortgage payments for their Florida condo, insurance premiums, credit card balances cleared, vacations disguised as emergencies. I pressed a button on the small projector I had brought along, a precaution I never thought I'd actually use. The wall filled with light. Numbers, dates, totals scrolled across the screen. A gasp rippled through the room. One cousin muttered, "That can't be right." My father shifted in his seat, jaw tightening. My mother tried to interrupt, but I raised a hand. "These figures cover 6 years," I said. "More than $1 million sent from me to you, and all the while you told people I was a freeloader." The screen flickered again, this time showing a video clip I had saved. My parents on vacation, champagne glasses in hand, laughing. My father's voice rang out. "Retirement is sweet when someone else pays for it." My mother added, "Our child may be a fool, but at least we get to enjoy it." The silence that followed was thicker than any prayer spoken at the funeral. A cousin cleared his throat and stood muttering an excuse to leave. Another stared at the floor, face pale. My uncle, the one who had posted Winner's back, Winners suddenly found the pattern in the carpet very interesting. My father's face flushed red. "You had no right to," he began. "No right," I cut him off. I had no right to expect support during surgery, no right to believe family would answer the phone when I needed help, no right to keep the home I worked for without you plotting to take it. The projector light hummed. Their silence was answer enough. I took a breath, steadying myself. There will be no more transfers, no more favors, no more pretending. You wanted this funeral to be your stage. Let it be mine instead. Family isn't entitlement, it's earned, and you've done nothing to earn it. I shut the folder and slipped it back into my bag. The lawyer, wide-eyed, shuffled his papers and muttered something about legal consequences for forged documents. My parents did not respond. For once, they had no audience willing to cheer them on. Walking out of that room, I felt lighter. Betrayal burns, but truth can scorch the earth clean. In the days that followed the funeral, my phone did not stop buzzing. Missed calls, stacked up messages poured in. Some begged for forgiveness, others demanded explanations, but most were filled with anger. I blocked them one by one. The silence that followed was sweeter than any apology could have been. Then I did what I should have done years earlier. I called my bank. Every recurring transfer, every automatic payment tied to my parents' accounts, I canceled them all. The banker asked me twice if I was certain. I told her more certain than I've ever been. Next, I met with my lawyer. We drew up papers protecting the penthouse as my sole property. Locks were changed, cameras installed, a security system updated. My family had once spoken of making copies of my keys. Now, even if they managed to find one, it would be useless. For the first time in years, my home felt like mine. But I didn't stop there. The humiliation they had poured on me had been public ballrooms, social posts, careless toasts, so my answer had to be public as well. I drafted a message and posted it across my accounts. A photo of the skyline from my penthouse window, followed by these words. For years, I covered other people's debts, mortgages, and vacations. Today I stop. Family isn't entitlement. No more free rides. The reaction was immediate. Thousands of comments flooded in. Strangers praised me for standing up. Some shared their own stories of being drained by relatives. The post spread faster than I could have imagined, shared and reshared until it reached people I had never met. The irony was sharp. Those who once called me invisible had made me viral. Meanwhile, back in Florida, the cracks widened. Friends of my parents saw the truth displayed in neon across the internet. Neighbors whispered. Invitations dried up. My parents, once so proud of their lifestyle, now faced sideways glances at every grocery store aisle. My cousin, the one who had toasted to useless relatives, shut down her social accounts after her own friends began tagging her under my post with words like shameful and ungrateful. Revenge, I learned, doesn't always come with fire and shouting. Sometimes it comes with a simple refusal, a slammed door, a bank transfer canceled, a truth shared at the right moment. And yet, beneath the satisfaction, I felt a hollow space. Cutting ties freed me, but it also left me standing alone. That's when I realized revenge is never the final chapter. It is only the turning of a page. Freedom is a strange companion. At first, it feels like silence, after years of noise, a clean breath after choking. But soon it turns into an echo reminding you of what used to be. I sat many nights in my penthouse, the city spread beneath me, lights glittering like 1,000 tiny promises. For the first time, the apartment felt safe, secured by new locks, guarded by law, untouched by their hands. Yet safety does not erase emptiness. I began with practical steps. My lawyer helped me draft a will, one that left nothing to the family who had tried to claim me as their bank. Instead, I named a lifelong friend as guardian of my affairs, someone who had stood with me during my surgery when blood ties had failed. That document felt heavier than any mortgage paper I had signed. It was not just property, it was the declaration of a life rebuilt on my own terms. I adjusted routines. I no longer checked the family group chats. Those had long since gone quiet, or perhaps I had simply muted them beyond reach. I spent weekends exploring corners of the city I had once been too tired to visit. Museums, jazz bars, hidden gardens between towers, I found pieces of life that belonged solely to me. And then there were the letters. Handwritten envelopes began arriving, my parents' handwriting unmistakable. They spoke of reconciliation, of misunderstandings, of wanting to mend what had been broken. But each letter carried something else. An invoice slipped between the lines. A new dental bill. A cruise deposit. A hint that their idea of reconciliation meant resuming the flow of money. The final letter came with a photo tucked inside them, on a beach, smiling beneath umbrellas. On the back in my mother's script, the words read, "We can forgive and move forward. Send what you can." I set the photo down, staring at the waves frozen behind their smiles. Forgiveness offered like a transaction is not forgiveness at all. I tore the letter in half, then again, until it was nothing but scraps. Still, life has a way of giving when blood takes away. A neighbor I had barely known began stopping by with fresh bread, small talk, that turned into real conversation. Slowly, cautiously, I let people in. Not relatives, not those bound by last names, but companions who chose me, who asked nothing but presence. That, I learned, is what family ought to mean. What they didn't know, the relatives watching from the shadows of social media, was that I no longer lived by their approval. Their silence was a gift, their absence, a space where better bonds could grow. The city skyline has become my nightly companion. From the balcony of my penthouse, I watch the lights flicker and fade the hum of traffic below, blending into something steady, almost comforting. This home, once a symbol of burden, is now a monument to survival. Every brick and beam has been paid for with my own labor, my own choices, not the false claims of those who called themselves family. I have stopped waiting for their voices. The phone no longer buzzes with their demands. The mailbox holds no more pleas disguised as letters. At first, the quiet felt unnatural, but slowly it turned into peace. Freedom, I realized, is not loud. It is the absence of noise that was never meant to be yours. I sometimes think back to that ballroom, to the laughter that rolled over me like waves. I remember the Thanksgiving table, where they nodded as if my life was theirs to split. I recall the funeral where they declared ownership of my home with shameless pride. Each memory is sharp, but no longer cuts. Time dulls the blade once you stop sharpening it yourself. Now, when I walk through the rooms of this penthouse, I do not hear their voices echoing. I hear only my own footsteps, steady and sure. The mortgage is mine, the deeds are mine, the silence is mine. And yet I do not close the book with bitterness. Family betrayed me, yes, but betrayal taught me something I could not have learned otherwise, that loyalty is a choice, not an obligation, that love without respect is not love at all. To anyone listening, let me leave this thought: wealth can be counted in dollars, but worth is counted in dignity. I nearly lost mine trying to buy belonging. Never again. So I stand here looking out at the city lights and I say it plainly. Family is not about draining one person dry. From now on, I live for myself. If you think I made the right choice, comment right. If you believe there was another path, share it below. Because in the end, this story is not just about me, it is about every person who has been silenced at a dinner table, mocked at a celebration, or treated like a wallet instead of a child. And perhaps by telling it, I have given you permission to choose yourself too.